Looks like we're live. Welcome to another Properties and Beers. Today we're going to be chatting about SDA vacancies, interest rates, and why rent vesting could actually be your smartest move yet. So before we get started, a little bit about me. I'm Gaurav Gupta, CEO and founder of Ethical Property Investments. We help everyday Aussies build high cash flow, ethical property portfolios that both do good and make money, because we believe in wealth that should be built with purpose and not just profit. So before we get started about what today's about, let's chat about what we do on a Friday for Properties and Beers. So if you're watching this, here we have it today. We have a native botanical vodka from Victoria by a company called Tread Softly. I thought I'd go local. It was interesting, a native botanical vodka. Let's give it a go. Cheers, guys. Interesting. It's quite nice, actually. More like a gin than a vodka. Those that have done this before, in terms of trying out alcohols in Tasmania, this is a very Tasmanian style vodka with the botanicals in there. So, by the way, if it's your first time here, welcome. And if you've been here before, welcome back. And you know the deal. Type in a comment. Let's chat about the state of everything going on, and obviously just to say hi. Now let's chat about what I would like to chat about today, and that is today we're unpacking 3 of the biggest shifts happening right now in Australia's property market. Number 1, the SDA housing gap and how ethical investors are solving what the government can't. Number 2, why we don't actually have packages available. And number 3, why rent vesting may be the key to living well and building wealth. So let's get this party started. And right now, in the first part of it, I kind of wanted to chat about the SDA housing gap. There's oversupply, undersupply, or is it misaligned? Like, what is it? Because here's the stats, right? There's roughly about 7,500 SDA homes sitting empty, while 9,000 people are looking for housing. What's going on, right? So those 9,000 or so people that currently have SDA on their plans and are not living in SDA, and at the same time, there are 7,500 vacant properties sitting empty. So is there an oversupply or an undersupply in NDI specialist disability accommodation? Well, I'd say both. We don't actually have a supply problem. We have a misfit problem. There's an oversupply of generic one-size-fits-all SDA homes that don't really match what people actually need. And there's an undersupply of the right kind of homes in the right locations built for real tenant needs and connected to actual quality SDA providers. So I believe this isn't a quantity issue. This is a quality issue. And, you know, in my company, Ethical Property Investments, we actually don't build for speculation, but we build for impact. We work backwards from the tenant to the SDA provider to the property. So here's the thing. Ethical SDA versus traditional SDA, one fills homes, the other leaves them empty. And that's my thoughts on some of the stats I've been seeing recently, saying, hey, there's still an undersupply or oversupply, especially around, for example, some of the information out there in places like Herald Sun, where you've seen these hundreds and hundreds of homes going vacant, and the market that has really a 30% vacancy rate on average. It's not a vacancy issue. It's a quality of where the vacancies are issue, because there is still undersupplies in certain markets. And, you know, I used to tell people about the public undersupplies, and then, builders used to come out there and build in those locations, and all of a sudden they were oversupplied. So I don't talk about where the hotspots are anymore, simply because I really feel that we're stewards of the market and want to protect it. So now, why we don't have packages available, let's chat about that. But before we do, and I want to make sure my mic's working. So if you're listening to this and you want to, if you're listening to this and you can hear the sound, it's all good, and let me know. It's the first time I'm using this new set of microphones, so hopefully it's all a good quality microphone. So the next step is we don't actually have packages available, because I get asked all the time, Gaurav, can't you just send me an email with all the packages? Well, unfortunately, that's not how ethical investing works, especially not in the NDI specialist disability accommodation space anyway, because this isn't off the shelf, it's off the charts custom. That's what it is. We don't do house and land packages. And here's the hard truth why. Because if you're buying house and land packages, you're probably buying a trap. And if you're wondering, a lot of builders and big developers push house and land packages so hard because it's easy for them. Now, here's the thing. If house and land packages are great, why aren't the best funds touching them with a 10-foot pole? And here's how I feel about it. The more cookie cutter the property, the more cookie cutter the deal, the more you risk and the more you're probably ignoring the reality of the truth. So what we do that's different is that we're not here to sell a product, right? We're here to actually guide our clients through a strategy. Why? Because I believe real impact takes real thought. And every investment we create starts with, number one, understanding the tenant's specific profile, confirming the local demand, and working with our SDA provider to make sure the right partnership is available and design the house for long-term livability, not just compliance. And here's the thing, right? Pre-packaged deals look really convenient and they're easy to put together, but what they save in time, they often cost in results. And packages just don't work in this space. They ignore nuance, they skip the relationships, and they risk the most important factor, what the actual tenant needs. Now, if you recall earlier, I talked about the mismatch in where participants wanted to live versus where they're built. And here's the thing, right? This creation of packages is what's caused this issue. Now, I believe the only successful way in this space only way to be successful in this space is to actually create a custom strategy and a custom location, right? Our process does take longer because it's more involved and more importantly, it's deeply human. Because when someone with a disability is going to call this place a home, a templated brochure just isn't good enough. You know, we build one home in time with one person in mind, and that's what makes the returns real. This isn't about passive investing, it's about intentional leadership in what we do. This is why there's an oversupply in some areas and undersupply in others, because people with disabilities just don't, in the most part, want to live in the newer estates anymore, right? They're looking for the established areas, and that's what makes the key to what we do work, right? And there's going to be a lot of questions about this, I'm sure, later on. Feel free to type in your questions in the comments. So now moving on from NDI, specialist disability accommodation, I want to chat about interest rates, right? It's a conversation that comes up often. Now, interest rates are down, but smart investors aren't celebrating yet. So interest rates went down. 95% of Aussies, according to the NAB, did some really interesting things instead. So despite the rate cuts from the RBA, NAB home loan clients, according to data, are still paying the original higher repayments. Well, why? Because they want to pay down the debt faster. A lot of investors are thinking long-term and building resilience, right? And on top of that, first-home buyers aren't rushing to occupy. There's a really interesting stat that's come out recently, and that they're choosing to invest first. So there's actually a 10% increase in rent vestors this year alone. Now, you might be like, Goro, what's a rent vestor? Well, I will cover that in a moment. But I just wanted to go through some more of my thoughts, because interest rate cuts don't mean it's easier to invest unless you know what to do with them. And the best investors don't get comfortable, they get calculated, right? Now, let's chat a little bit about rent vesting. Now, I believe it's a strategy that buys you freedom first. So rent where you love, invest where it grows, because those two things may not be the same. And rent vesting, I don't believe it's a trend, it's a strategy. It's been around since the dawn of investment. In fact, when I was young, that's what I used to do. I used to, live where I wanted to live and invest where I believe the best growth would have happened. And, it's kind of like you rent in the suburb you love where the lifestyle fits. You invest in the suburb where the numbers make sense and where the data just backs it. So at the moment, we're finding 10% more first-home buyers are rent vesting instead of buying their first property. And, it's interesting, over the last year, over the last 6 months, actually, New South Wales and Western Australia have led that shift. So let me ask you a question. Would you rather own the home of your dreams or own the future that pays for it? Because here's the thing. With rent vesting, it allows you to start the process of building the foundation for the future that pays for it. And I believe You don't need to compromise. You just need to sequence smarter. And no, renting, let's be honest, doesn't mean you're losing. You're actually gaining. I believe you're gaining flexibility, liquidity, leverage. And, buy the assets that buy your forever home instead of rent vesting. Buy the assets that buy your forever home. That's the rent vesting play. And I did that for the longest time. And I saw people move into these smaller houses that weren't really suitable. And their borrowing capacity got stuck. I chose to wait it out as long as I possibly could before we said, okay, now it's time to move out into our forever home. And we've been there for the last 6-7 years now. We end up buying what used to be a Signature Series display home. Because why? We wanted all the mod cons. And guess what? As a first home, we could actually afford it. Because I'd been rent vesting for so long that we built up that base that allowed us to pick up whatever we really wanted to pick up as really a first-time owner-occupier purchase. So I believe rent vesting is for first-time investors, lifestyle seekers, and the freedom chasers. So you don't need to choose between now and later. Rent vesting gives you both. And I have this conversation on a regular basis with people that come through the door. Should I invest in my first property or should I invest in my owner-occupier? And look, I say both. Do it within a short period of each other if you want. But if you want your best borrowing capacity and you want to build a foundation, right? Rent vest first, invest owner occupier second, right? So rent vest first, owner occupier second. And here's a statement that would summarize it: live well, build wealth, not either or, but both. Kind of like the girl in the taco ad, right? Which would you choose? Well, why not both? So those are some of my thoughts. And by the way, here's some of my closing thoughts as we get to it. I believe the market is changing fast. NDI, specialist disability accommodations, misunderstood. Rate cuts are revealing strategy caps. And you know what? Rent vesting might just be the next evolution of freedom-led investing. Guys, this has been Property and Beers. Hopefully you've had a great time. And this is how we choose to lead. Do good, make money, repeat. And cheers to that.